Jamal, a 14-year-old with a quiet brilliance, watches as his science project, a simple renewable energy model, gets mocked by his teacher. "Science isn't for everyone," she says, dismissing him with a sneer. But what Mrs. Adams doesn't know is that Jamal's talent is about to turn the tables, because today NASA is about to offer him a scholarship. The classroom was alive with the usual chatter, a cacophony of voices as the bell signaling the end of the day drew nearer. Laughter bounced off the walls as students leaned back in their chairs, exchanging jokes and stories about their latest adventures. The buzz of youthful energy filled the space, but in the far corner, 14-year-old Jamal sat still, his eyes focused on his desk, completely immersed in the small science project before him. It was a humble creation, a simple yet elegant model of a renewable energy system using solar panels. A small circuit board hummed quietly, powering a tiny motor that demonstrated the principles of sustainable energy. To most, it would look like a basic science project, but to Jamal, it was a labor of love. It was a reflection of weeks of research, careful measurements, and long hours spent piecing together parts that weren't always easy to find. The project wasn't flashy or dramatic. There were no neon lights or mechanical gizmos that would make it stand out in a room full of elaborate, showy experiments. But Jamal knew something others didn't. He knew that this was more than just a model. It was proof of his understanding of the world's energy needs, of the way things worked beyond the surface. It was his quiet rebellion against the expectations others had of him. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Jamal continued to gaze at his project, a slight furrow between his brows. His classmates rose from their seats, their voices growing louder as they collected their bags and hurried out of the room. Jamal remained where he was, unwilling to tear his eyes away from the model he'd crafted with such care. The noise in the classroom seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the soft hum of his solar panels. Mrs. Adams, the science teacher, made her usual rounds before dismissing the class. She walked past Jamal's desk, her heels clicking against the tile floor, and paused. The sound of her footsteps halted abruptly beside him, followed by a brief silence that sent a cold shiver down Jamal's spine. He didn't need to look up to know what was coming. He had always felt Mrs. Adams's gaze, sharp, dismissive, and filled with the kind of judgment that cut deeper than words ever could. She peered down at his project, her expression curling into a sneer. "What's this, Jamal?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "A bunch of plastic and paper." She barely glanced at the model, her eyes already moving on to the next desk. Jamal's stomach sank as her words hit him like a slap in the face. She hadn't even taken the time to examine his work, just dismissed it in the same way she always dismissed him. He had hoped just once she might see beyond his quiet demeanor, but it seemed he was wrong. Before he could even gather his thoughts, Mrs. Adams turned back, her face twisted in a sharp frown. "You know, Jamal," she said, her voice louder now, carrying the weight of someone used to being listened to. "Maybe you should stick to something easier. Science isn't for everyone." Her eyes locked onto his, challenging him without words. Not every kid can be a scientist. Maybe you'd do better in a different class. Jamal's heart skipped a beat, his throat tightened, but no words came. He wanted to shout, to argue, to tell her that she didn't know anything about him, about the hours he'd spent learning and perfecting this project. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't matter. Mrs. Adams had already made up her mind about him, about who he was and who he would never be. She saw a kid from a struggling neighborhood, a boy who didn't fit the mold of the perfect student. To her, Jamal was just another face in the crowd, easily overlooked and dismissed. He swallowed hard, picking up his project and packing it away, his fingers trembling slightly as he gathered the materials. But even as he packed the final piece into the box, something inside him shifted. Her words, cruel and dismissive as they were, ignited something in him. A quiet, burning determination that he hadn't known was there. It wasn't anger. It wasn't defiance. It was a quiet promise, a vow to himself that he would prove her wrong. He would show her and everyone else that they had underestimated him. As he stood up to leave, carrying his project, he took one last glance around the classroom. The noise, the laughter, the voices of his classmates. They felt distant, as if they belonged to another world. His project, his dream, was the only thing that mattered now. Mrs. Adams's words still echoed in his mind, but they didn't feel as heavy anymore. They felt like fuel. With each step he took toward the door, Jamal promised himself that he wouldn't let anyone's prejudice define who he was or what he could accomplish. No matter what it took, he would prove that his dreams were bigger than any classroom judgment. And with that silent vow in his heart, Jamal carried his project out of the room, determined to make his mark on the world, and to show Mrs. Adams exactly what he was capable of. The gymnasium was alive with the bustle of the school's annual science fair. Tables were arranged in neat rows, each showcasing the hard work of students eager to present their projects. Some were large and extravagant, complete with flashing lights and whirring gears, while others were smaller, more modest creations. But all of them had one thing in common. They were bright, attention-grabbing, and flashy. Everything Jamal's project was not. Jamal stood at the edge of the gym, his hands nervously adjusting the small solar panel model that he had carefully arranged on the table. The simple setup looked even smaller in the sea of more impressive displays. Robotic arms, volcanoes that erupted in a burst of foam, intricate models of the human brain. His project, a quiet testament to renewable energy, was understated and unimpressive in comparison. But to Jamal, it was the most important thing in the room. He watched as groups of students drifted by, some laughing, others chatting in low voices. Their eyes flicked over the projects on the tables, moving quickly from one to the next, never pausing for long. Jamal's heart sank as not a single person stopped at his display. Not his classmates, not his friends, no one. The sound of conversation and laughter seemed to grow louder, more distant, as the noise in the gym swallowed the quiet space around him. At that moment, Jamal felt small. He had worked so hard for this day, pouring hours of effort into crafting something meaningful. But standing there, watching his peers pass by, without a second glance, it was hard not to feel invisible. His disappointment was heavy, but there was something else there too, a flicker of pride. Despite the lack of attention, despite the failure to draw the crowd that the other projects had, he knew what he had built. He knew the science behind it, the research that had gone into every calculation, every piece of the model. He knew it was more than what anyone could see. It was more than just a project. It was his vision. And that mattered more than the fleeting approval of his classmates. Still, the sting of rejection was hard to ignore. He turned to his project once more, fingers lightly grazing the edges of the solar panels, as though seeking comfort in the work he had created. His mind drifted back to Mrs. Adams's words, the cold, dismissive tone that had echoed in his ears since the moment she'd belittled him. She had made him feel like his dreams were too big for someone like him, like his passion for science was just a distraction. But as he looked down at the model, his resolve hardened. He wasn't just building something for school. He was building something bigger, something that could change the way the world used energy. A soft murmur from the crowd near the entrance caught his attention. He glanced up, momentarily distracted, just as a figure stepped into the gym. An older man, well dressed in a suit and tie, walked in with an air of quiet authority. His eyes scanned the room, moving past the other projects, until they landed on Jamal's table. For a brief moment, their gazes locked, and Jamal felt a flicker of hope. Something about the man's demeanor suggested that he wasn't just another passerby. The man took a slow step toward Jamal's table, his gaze intent on the solar panel model. Jamal watched, confused but hopeful. Why was this man so interested? Was he just being polite? Or did he actually see something in the project that others hadn't? The man leaned over the table, his sharp eyes inspecting every part of the setup. He traced the outline of the solar panels with his fingers, pausing to study the handwritten notes that Jamal had carefully attached to the side. He didn't rush. There was a deliberate slowness to his movements, as though he were trying to understand the project on a deeper level. His brows furrowed slightly in concentration as he looked over the wiring and the way the energy flowed through the small circuit. Jamal's heart beat a little faster as he watched the man's reaction. It wasn't the detached glance of indifference he'd seen from everyone else. This was something different. The man seemed intrigued. His expression softened, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Jamal's confusion only deepened, but a part of him couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. Could this be someone who actually understood what he had done? The man finally straightened up, his eyes meeting Jamal's with a warmth that immediately put him at ease. "This is remarkable," he said, his voice calm but filled with genuine admiration. "I've never seen anything quite like this from someone your age." Jamal blinked, stunned. The words seemed almost surreal. He had spent so much of the day feeling like his work had been overlooked, like it was unworthy of attention. And now this stranger, this man who looked like he might be someone important, was speaking as though Jamal's project had some true value. "My name is Dr. Samuel O'Brien," the man continued, offering a handshake. "I work with NASA on a renewable energy project. Would you be interested in an internship? We'd love to have someone with your talents on our team." Jamal's breath caught in his throat. An internship with NASA. He blinked, unsure if he had heard the words correctly. This was insane. Just yesterday, he had been invisible in the classroom, dismissed by Mrs. Adams, written off by everyone around him. And now here he was, standing in front of a man who worked with NASA, one of the most prestigious organizations in the world, offering him a chance to join a team. Dr. O'Brien's gaze never wavered from Jamal's face, as though he were waiting for a response, giving Jamal the space to process what had just been said. But all Jamal could think about was how, just moments ago, he had been alone, ignored, and now this. The words felt like a lifeline, but also an impossible dream. He didn't know what to say. His mouth was dry, and his thoughts were racing too fast for him to catch up. "Well, Jamal," Dr. O'Brien said again, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "What do you think?" Jamal finally managed to gather himself. His heart was still pounding in his chest, his mind reeling, but there was a clarity in his response, something that had been building inside him all along. He looked Dr. O'Brien in the eye, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel overlooked. He was standing in front of someone who could see him for what he truly was, a person capable of great things. I think this is exactly the kind of thing Mrs. Adams told me I could never do, Jamal said, his voice steady but laced with quiet strength. But I guess some people don't understand how big a dream can grow from the smallest seeds. Dr. O'Brien nodded, clearly impressed. He gave a short chuckle before his eyes softened. "You're absolutely right," he said. "And sometimes it's those very people who are blind to the real brilliance around them." Jamal's heart swelled. He had just taken the first step towards something huge, something that could change everything. But before he could fully process what was happening, Dr. O'Brien leaned in, his expression serious now. "I'd like to speak with you about something important," he said, his voice low, but carrying a weight that made Jamal's stomach flip. Jamal's mind was still reeling when Dr. O'Brien led him out of the gym and into a quieter hallway. The sudden shift in the atmosphere, away from the loud buzz of the science fair, left Jamal feeling a bit disoriented, like he was stepping into a different world entirely. The weight of what had just happened hung heavy on his shoulders. 1 minute, he had been just another overlooked student, silently enduring the dismissal of his peers and his teacher. The next, he was standing next to a man from NASA being offered an internship. Dr. O'Brien glanced over at Jamal as they walked, noticing the quiet amazement in his eyes. "It's a lot to take in," he said kindly, his voice filled with understanding. "I can imagine this is a little overwhelming." Jamal nodded, his throat tight. I never thought," he started, but his words faltered. How could he explain the weight of this moment? How could he describe what it felt like to be seen, really seen for the first time? "You're exceptional, Jamal," Dr. O'Brien interrupted, his tone firm yet warm. "What you've created here is far more advanced than most students your age. What you've built, this model, it's the kind of innovation we need. The world needs thinkers like you, especially in the field of renewable energy. You're doing something that will change the future. You've already proven you can think beyond the limitations people put on you." Jamal blinked. Dr. O'Brien's words felt like a lifeline, pulling him out of the deep sea of doubt he'd been drowning in for so long. All those years of being dismissed, of feeling invisible, suddenly seemed like they were behind him. He wasn't just a quiet kid with big dreams. He was someone whose work mattered. He had value, real, tangible value. "And that's why we want you on our team," Dr. O'Brien continued, his eyes shining with sincerity. "We believe in you, Jamal. We believe in your vision, your creativity, and your passion for renewable energy. That's why I'm offering you an internship with NASA. It's a chance to work alongside top scientists and engineers, people who can help you take your work to the next level. You could be part of something truly groundbreaking." Jamal's heart pounded in his chest. An internship at NASA. He barely processed the words. He had dreamed of this, of doing something that mattered, of being part of a team that changed the world. But to hear it from someone who actually worked at NASA, someone who had seen the potential in his small model, was something he couldn't quite grasp. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone, unsure if he was dreaming. Dr. O'Brien smiled. sensing Jamal's uncertainty. You don't have to decide right away. Take your time. But know this, you've got what it takes, and we'd be honored to have you join us. Jamal took a deep breath, swallowing the lump in his throat. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had something to offer. He wasn't just the kid who had been pushed aside, ignored by his teachers and classmates. He was someone with a future that was suddenly wide open. Jamal's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat, trying again. I'd like to accept. I don't think I can turn down an opportunity like this. The words came out steady, though his chest was still tight with emotion. But beneath the rawness, there was a quiet triumph, a sense of pride in himself, in his work, in his journey. He had come so far, and now he was about to take the next step into something bigger than he had ever imagined. Dr. O'Brien's smile widened. Good. I knew you would. He reached out to shake Jamal's hand. Welcome to the team, Jamal. The days that followed were a blur, a whirlwind of paperwork, orientations, and travel arrangements. But Jamal could hardly contain his excitement. He had been to NASA before, on field trips in elementary school, where the sleek buildings and cutting-edge technology had filled him with awe. But now he was walking through those very halls, not as a visitor, but as someone who was now a part of this extraordinary world. As he walked through NASA's headquarters, his eyes widened at the scale of it all. The clean white walls, the gleaming floors, and the buzz of engineers and scientists discussing their work. It all felt like a dream. He could hardly believe he was here, amidst some of the brightest minds in the world. Jamal had always loved science, but this was something else. This was the future, and he was going to help build it. He paused for a moment, taking it all in. He could see himself here, working on projects that could shape the future of energy, collaborating with people who shared his passion. For the first time in his life, Jamal felt like he was in the right place. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from his mom. I'm so proud of you, baby. You've come so far. Jamal smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. It wasn't just about proving Mrs. Adams wrong anymore, or about seeking validation from anyone. It was about believing in himself, in his worth. He had done the work, and now he was finally being recognized. That was all that mattered. As Jamal walked through the halls of NASA, he silently made a vow to himself, a vow that had been years in the making. He would never again let anyone make him feel small. He would never let judgment, prejudice, or anyone's low expectations define him. He would rise above it all, continue to push forward, and reach higher than he had ever dreamed possible. And, perhaps most importantly, he promised that he would always look beyond the surface of others, searching for that hidden brilliance that so often went unnoticed. Because he knew now, better than anyone, that the smallest seeds could grow into the greatest dreams. He had proven it to himself, and now he would help others do the same. If you've enjoyed Jamal's journey, make sure to share this story and subscribe for more stories of perseverance and inspiration. Let's keep finding the hidden brilliance in all of us.